You ever pass a man sleeping under a bridge and wonder who he used to be? That night in Seattle, under a slick ribbon of freeway and rain, I met a man like that. He didn't ask me for money. He asked for something rarer. The right to keep his dignity. And that was the night the rain changed both of our lives. SFX, rain, distant traffic, a wiper thumping once, then failing. My name is Margaret Hale. Most people call me Maggie, though few get close enough to try. I run Haleworks, a company that stitches fiber and code through the bones of this city. I like clean timelines, clear metrics, and plans that don't slip. But plans slip. On a Tuesday soaked to the teeth, my driver peeled off for an emergency. My phone died in a black pocket of battery nowhere, and a bridge over the Fremont Cut swallowed my headlights like a bad idea. Steam coughed from the hood. The rain came down in needles. I popped the latch and stepped out into the kind of cold that turns your breath into testimony. I knew the calculus. CEO alone at night, high heels on wet concrete, a purse that could pay someone's rent or someone else's habit. I told myself the risk was manageable. I told myself lots of things. SFX. Metal hood creaking. Rain drumming. Muffled footfalls. He was there before I saw him, just a movement in the dark like a page, turning then a figure rose beside a cart of scrap and cans. Rain flattening a knit cap to his gray-shot hair. He was older than me by a few years, maybe. The beard wasn't a choice so much as a season. But his eyes were sober as a meeting at 8 a.m. That steam's a hose, he said, voice low, Pacific Northwest gravel. Or a cap gone lazy. You don't want to open that in the rain. I kept my posture square. Thank you. I can manage. Maybe, he said, glancing at my shoes. Not in those. A sliver of smile. The rain carried it away. A second shadow peeled out of the dark, leaner, faster. The hand came for my purse with that underbridge efficiency, a snatch and run I'd seen on a dozen security reels. The first man moved before I did. He didn't shout, he angled his cart. One steel wheel barked against concrete and clipped the runner's shin. The thief stumbled, a can clattered. My purse slid, wet leather skidding to my feet. The runner cursed, took stock, then vanished into rain. The man in the knit cap stepped back as if to give me room to breathe. You okay? He asked. I'm fine, I said, and found that I meant it. Adrenaline, sure, but also a strange, sober clarity. I looked at him fully then. The coat was too big, a tired army green, but buttoned with precision. The hands, those were what I saw next. Not the dirt, not the scars. The way the fingers half curled around invisible edges, as if they missed a keyboard more than they needed a bottle. Thank you, I said. I don't have cash. He shook his head. Didn't ask. Then let me pay you back another way. I reached for a card that wasn't there. The purse was rain. Heavy. Zippers glued with cold. He noticed me wrestling with it and looked away, a courtesy. Coffee, he said finally. If there's a place still pouring. There is, I said, though I wasn't sure. What's your name? Jack, he said. Jack Turner. I'm Maggie. He nodded, as though names were flags you only raise when the wind is worth it. We walked toward a lighted rectangle that might be a late-night stand. The rain made a curtain. Under it the city sounded like tires sighing and distant freight. Jack pushed the cart with gentle authority, like a man piloting a skiff. Up close, I saw the cap was a home knit, pilled but clean. Beneath the beard, his mouth had the tired softness of someone who'd once smiled easily and then learned not to. You live under this span? I asked. I sleep, he said. Live is a bigger word. What did you do? Before? He glanced at me sidelong. Funny question. Before what? This rain? This decade? This country? Before the bridge, I said. He stopped under a sodium light and tipped his head at the steam still ghosting my car's hood. You sure you don't want to deal with that first? Tomorrow, a tow, I said. Tonight. Coffee. SFX. Bell over door, heater whirring, a coffee pot pouring. The place was one of those liminal rooms that holds fishermen at dawn and ghosts at midnight. A single employee slid us 2 paper cups and left us to a corner booth. Jack didn't sit until I did. He kept his card outside, visible through the rain-streaked glass like a tether to something honest. I wrote code, he said, cupping his hands around the heat like it was a story. Back when code was a language and not just a product line. Security. Little locks that keep big promises. For who? A shop you swallowed, he said mildly. Not you, personally. Your company. 10, 11 years back. I felt the quiet shift behind my ribs. Acquisitions blur in hindsight. Impact never does. I was a VP then, not the hand on the wheel, but proximity is a kind of ownership. What happened? The usual slow motion, he said. A project starts as a shield. Someone sees it could be a funnel. Data that should stay with the poor flows uphill to the rich. We argue. The spreadsheets win. I put up a wall. They take away my bricks. They? Men who don't sleep under bridges, he said, but the line landed without bitterness, as if he'd filed the paperwork on the emotion and closed the case. He stared into the steam. My wife got sick. The deductible grew a second head. I missed a meeting. She missed a treatment. I told them their patch would leak. They told me my attitude would, too. Then it rained like this for a long time. I'm sorry, I said, and meant that, too. He nodded as if to accept the intention, not the apology. Seattle has good libraries, he said after a moment. Warm chairs, working outlets. You can fix 100 laptops there and buy soup with the thanks. You fix them for whoever asks. Job applications. Schoolwork. A badly timed Zoom with a parole officer. Dignity is sometimes just a battery and a clean screen. He lifted his cup toward me slightly. You of all people know that. I did. Or I should have. Or I had known it once, before the boardrooms got their hand on the dimmer switch and set everything to appropriate. Outside, a siren passed, smearing blue along the rain. Inside, the heater coughed and recovered. Jack, I said, if I asked you to tell your story to some people who matter, would you? He smiled without amusement. People who matter don't listen to stories. They buy outcomes. What if the story is the outcome? He studied me. There's a kind of eye contact that isn't a challenge or a shield, just the simple decision to tell the truth. Maggie, I don't need a rescue. I didn't offer one, I said. I need a witness. He sat with that. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his too-big coat and pulled out a folded, rain-soft paper towel. He smoothed it on the table and placed a stub of pencil beside it. Humor me, he said. He wrote while the heater hummed and the rain counted time on the window. Symbols bloomed careful, elegant, a hand that remembered. A function name whispered in from my own earlier life, when I wrote more code than emails. A checksum that looked like home. He slid the paper to me. If the people you say matter at all, they'll recognize this. If they don't, you'll know what you're walking into. I read it twice, a third time to be sure. My throat did that private tightening it does when an old muscle is called to lift a new weight. I set the paper down like it might bruise. You wrote this? Before the bridge, he said. And after, in my head, over and over. So it wouldn't forget me. I reached for my purse, found a card and a pen that still had ink. I wrote a number that rings even when my assistant thinks it shouldn't. Tomorrow, I said, I'll have a tow take the car and a driver take you to a place with a shower and a lock that works. Then you and I will go to a room with cameras and a table that remembers too much. You don't owe me. You owe the truth you just put on this paper. He didn't touch the card. He watched me the way people watch a shoreline to see if it's coming closer or the tide is going out. If I vanish by morning, he said softly, it won't be because I ran. Sometimes the ground moves under you, and you slide. Then I'll come back to the bridge, I said. He nodded, finished his coffee, and stood. At the door, he hesitated, then tugged off the knit cap. His hair under it was thinner, more human than the myth he carried. He set the cap on the table. Trade, he said. You gave me a line to call. I'll give you something to remember. He left without waiting for the thanks, the doorbell shivering after him. SFX. Bell. Rain louder for a beat, then a calmer interior hush. I lifted the cap. It was heavier than it looked, rain-soaked and honest. Inside the cuff, tucked where the yarn had stretched with years, a second scrap of paper waited, folded to the size of a coin. I eased it open. Not a note. Not a plea. A formula, hand-drawn like the first, but finished this time, annotated with tiny initials I knew better than my own 3 letters that sign contracts and settle arguments, printed like a watermark in the margins of my career. The signature wasn't his. It was mine. Or rather, it belonged to the company I steer. The masthead that hangs over my office and my conscience both. I held the scrap to the light, the ink bleeding delicately where the rain had found it, and felt the hinge of the weak turn. Okay, Jack. I said to the empty booth. To the rain. To the bridge. Tomorrow, then. SFX. Rain receding under piano, a single low note held like a promise. The next morning the rain had turned to mist. The kind that softens the edges of buildings and hides the mountains beyond the bay. I drove myself to headquarters, the paper scrap tucked inside my coat pocket like contraband. The cap he'd left was still on the passenger seat, faintly smelling of smoke and damp wool. My assistant greeted me with the usual flurry of questions, board updates, investor calls, but I heard only the echo of Jack's voice from the night before. You'll know what you're walking into. At my desk, I flattened the scrap under a reading lamp. The formula was a checksum string part of a data encryption architecture, one that HaleWorks had used years ago in a project called Sentinel. That project had been absorbed, renamed, and quietly forgotten when we acquired a smaller firm, CipherTrace Technologies. 10 years ago. The same timeline Jack had mentioned. I typed the old repository name into our archive server, expecting a polite error message. But instead the screen blinked and filled with an outdated interface I hadn't seen in years. There it was. Sentinel. Authored by J. Turner. Last modified by C. Blake. I felt something twist behind my ribs. Conrad Blake, my COO, had joined the company right after that acquisition. His fingerprints were everywhere, but Turner's original code, Jack's code, was cleaner, elegant, designed to protect user data through randomized partitioning. The modified version inverted the function. It tagged, categorized, and traced the poorest users, turning security into surveillance. I sat back, staring at the screen until my reflection looked like someone else's. Then I did something I hadn't done in a decade. I closed the office door and made coffee myself. The first sip was bitter, grounding. I called Lena Park, my communications director, and asked her to clear my schedule. Personal errand, I said. She raised an eyebrow, the kind that had learned never to ask too much. By noon, I was parked beside the old brick church that doubled as a soup kitchen on Fremont Avenue. The line of people waiting curved around the block, men, women, a few children holding plastic bags of belongings. Inside, the smell of stew and bleach filled the air. A volunteer pointed me toward the back. He was there, hunched over a folding table, repairing a second-hand laptop with a screwdriver smaller than his thumb. "Morning, Maggie," he said without surprise, as if I were just another part of the weather. "I wasn't sure you'd show." "You left me evidence," I said. "That counts as an invitation." He smiled a little. "Guess it does." I sat across from him, the chair's metal chill leaking through my coat. "I looked at your formula," I said quietly. "It matches our old encryption protocol. And the company you worked for, CipherTrace, it was ours." "I know," he said, twisting a loose wire back into place. "I wrote the bones of that code. After the merger, your people rewrote it. Said they were optimizing." He looked up, eyes steady. "But optimization isn't the same as exploitation. You think they used it to collect data." "I don't think," he said. "I know. They changed the randomizer to an identifier. Every user with low network activity, mostly poor folks on subsidized plans, got tagged. Their browsing habits sold to third parties." I tried to blow the whistle. "Your COO made sure I lost the job before the memo reached anyone who'd read past the first line." "Conrad," I said. He nodded. "He was the hatchet man back then. Company needed someone to cut. He cut. You should have gone to the press." Jack shook his head. "You ever try explaining a checksum function to a reporter looking for blood? They don't care about bits and keys. They care about villains and victims." I wasn't ready to be either. The church bell chimed once for the half hour. A volunteer brought us 2 paper bowls of soup. Steam rose between us, curling like unspoken thoughts. "Why give this to me now?" I asked. "Because you look like someone who'd remember what truth feels like," he said simply. "And because I'm tired of watching the city choke on its own reflection." I wanted to argue, to claim innocence by ignorance, but the words wouldn't come. Instead I asked, "Do you have proof besides this formula?" "A drive," he said. "Encrypted. Needs the key from Sentinel's old server. That server's been offline for years. Not if you know where to look." His tone was matter of fact, not defiant. He reached into his coat and placed a weathered USB drive on the table, wrapped in electrical tape. "This has pieces of the original code, logs, emails, enough to start a fire if someone lights it right." I hesitated. Taking it meant crossing a line. I'd drawn myself the one between CEO and citizen. "If this gets out," I said, "it won't just hurt Conrad, it could sink the company." "Then maybe it deserves to drown," he said. His calmness unsettled me more than anger would have. People built fortunes on that leak. Mine wasn't the only life it wrecked. He pushed the drive closer. "You asked for truth. That's what it costs." I took it. The plastic was warm from his hand. "What do you want, Jack?" He thought for a moment. "To stop being the ghost in other people's spreadsheets." Outside, The rain started again, soft as a heartbeat. A car passed, splashing light through the stained glass. I stood, feeling the weight of the drive in my pocket. "I'll look into it," I said. "Carefully." "Careful's how we got here," he said. But his voice was kind. "Be honest instead." When I left, I caught sight of a black sedan idling across the street, windows fogged. My stomach tightened. Back at headquarters, Conrad was waiting in my office. All charm and cologne. "Morning, boss," he said. "I hear you've been doing some field work." "Just checking on our outreach projects," I said. "You know, community impact. Always good optics." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Word of advice: be cautious who you mingle with. Fremont's got some colorful characters." "You mean people?" I said. "That's the word you're looking for." He laughed lightly. "Sure, people. But one of those people has been contacting employees, asking about old projects." "CipherTrace, Sentinel ring any bells?" I kept my face neutral. "Vaguely." "Then let me be clear. If anyone approaches you about legacy code, especially disgruntled ex-contractors, send them my way. Legal's handling it." He leaned closer. "I'd hate for any misunderstandings to reach the press. Or the board." "Of course," I said. He left, leaving behind a faint trace of expensive confidence. As the door clicked shut, I opened my drawer and placed the USB drive inside, under a folder labeled Internal Audit. My pulse was too loud in the quiet. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the city's reflections slide down the glass like data streams. I thought about Jack under the bridge, his cart rattling through puddles, the way he'd said dignity is sometimes just a battery and a clean screen. Around 2 a.m., I logged into an old admin account from my home laptop, a forgotten credential that still carried root access. The Sentinel server flickered to life in a dusty corner of our cloud, buried beneath layers of corporate history. It asked for a decryption key. I entered the sequence from Jack's formula. The terminal blinked once, then poured lines of code across the screen, green as an unhealed wound. Embedded within were user logs, millions of entries, timestamps, IPs all tied to low-income neighborhoods. It was undeniable. I printed nothing. I saved nothing. I just watched, feeling the slow burn of shame and clarity mix into something like resolve. The system pinged, unauthorized access detected. Someone else was watching. I closed the laptop, heart pounding. The next morning, Lena burst into my office, breathless. "Maggie, the Seattle Tribune just called. They're asking about a rumored data scandal from a decade ago, CipherTrace. They say they have an anonymous source inside." My blood went cold. "What source?" "They wouldn't say." I looked past her to the window. Across the street, the same black sedan was parked again, engine idling. "Tell them no comment," I said, already reaching for my coat. "And cancel everything on my calendar." "Where are you going?" Lena asked. I paused at the door. "Back to the bridge," I said. "There's a man who deserves to know what storm he just started." SFX, rain swelling, a low hum of traffic rising like a pulse, then fading into the sound of a single footstep echoing under the bridge. The bridge smelled of wet metal and memory. Cars thudded overhead, their headlights slicing the mist in steady rhythms. I found Jack where I'd found him before, kneeling beside a small propane stove, steam rising from a dented pot. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "You came back," he said, as if it were an outcome he'd already calculated. "I told you I would," I said, breath clouding in the cold. He nodded toward a folding chair made from milk crates and plywood. "Then you'd better sit. Looks like you've got something heavy in your pocket." Saturday. The noise of the city seemed to dim around us. "You were right," I said quietly. "The code, the data, all of it. I saw the logs myself. They targeted poor communities, sold their information like spare parts." Jack stirred the pot, a thin smile flickering. "Told you it wasn't paranoia. It's profit. This could destroy Hale Works," I said. "Conrad's already nervous. There's a leak to the Tribune." "That's not me," he said quickly. "I don't talk to papers. They twist it into charity or tragedy, not truth. Then someone else knows." "Someone always does," he murmured. "Secrets are like mold, they grow best in silence." I watched his hands, steady even as the wind cut through. "I think Conrad's onto you. He had someone following me." Jack's eyes hardened. "Then he's scared." "That's a start. Scared people do stupid things," I said. "He's powerful, and if this comes out wrong, he'll make you disappear before the story does." Jack chuckled without humor. "Lady, I already disappeared 10 years ago. The trick now is showing up in the right light when the camera finally turns. I reached into my coat and pulled out the USB drive, placing it on the crate table. We need to move this somewhere safe. If Conrad gets his hands on it, he'll bury it again. He stared at it, then shook his head. There's one copy. You think I'd trust any cloud not owned by someone with stock options? The only backup's in my head. You memorized the code? Just the important bits, he said. Enough to rebuild it if I had a clean system. Then come with me, I said. To the office. We'll restore it together. He blinked. To your office? The tower with the glass walls and the security guards who chase people like me off the sidewalk? I'll handle them, I said. You'll be my consultant. That's a generous title for a man who hasn't had a shower this week. Titles are easy, I said. Truth isn't. He studied me for a long moment, then stood. All right, CEO. Let's go tell your empire what ghosts sound like. We took my car. Parked in shadow beneath the overpass. As we drove downtown, the skyline sharpened against the dusk. Silver and blue like circuitry. Jack watched it through the window. Funny, he said. You spend a lifetime building walls of glass, thinking it means transparency. But from down here, all you see is reflection. At headquarters, I swiped us through the private garage entrance. The security guard looked up from his phone, squinting at Jack. He's with me, I said before questions could form. It contractor. The guard hesitated, then waved us through. Inside the elevator, Jack stared at his reflection in the mirrored panel. Haven't been in one of these in a decade, he said. Still feels like confession in reverse, you rise instead of kneel. Then let's make it worth the climb, I said. On the 32nd floor, the office was empty except for the hum of machines and the faint scent of ozone from too many servers. I logged into the restricted system. This terminal still has local access to the Sentinel archives, I explained. We can rebuild from here. Jack sat beside me, pulling his chair close. His fingers hovered over the keyboard like an old pianist reacquainting himself with an instrument. Then they began to move. Lines of code appeared, green on black, elegant as calligraphy. See here? He said, pointing. This loop should randomize user identifiers. They replaced it with a static hash. Every session became traceable. That's criminal, I whispered. That's corporate, he said. Criminal just depends on who writes the terms of service. I smiled grimly. We can prove intent if we find the original commit logs. Already on it, he said, tapping faster. The monitor filled with directories. One folder blinked open emails, project notes, memos. He froze. This one's dated the week I was fired. He clicked it. A string of messages unfolded, each more damning than the last. There was Conrad's name, approving the data sale to a marketing firm. There was my own predecessor's signature authorizing silence in exchange for profit. My stomach turned. We have to take this to the board, I said. Jack leaned back. They'll protect him. You're talking about millions in stock, Maggie. You think any of them will burn their portfolios for ethics? Then I'll do it myself. And when they replace you? His tone wasn't cruel, just tired. They'll call it restructuring. You'll be gone before the ink dries. Maybe, I said. But at least it'll be on record. The screen flickered suddenly. A red prompt appeared. Remote access detected. Then the files began to vanish one by one, deleted faster than we could react. He's here, Jack muttered. He's pulling the server remotely. I slammed the power key, yanking the plug. The monitor died mid-delete. Will that stop him? I asked. For now. But he knows we looked. My phone buzzed immediately. A text. You're making a mistake, Maggie. Let's talk alone. No signature. No need. Jack glanced at the screen, then at me. He's not bluffing. You're in his crosshairs now. Then let him aim, I said, pocketing the phone. We'll move the drive off-site tonight. You've got somewhere safe? A friend in communications. Lena. I trust her. Jack nodded slowly. Good. But don't bring her too deep. The deeper people go, the harder it is to climb back out. We packed up, leaving the office dark except for city light leaking through the glass. Downstairs, the guard was gone. Only the echo of our footsteps followed us to the car. On the street, a black sedan idled across the corner. Jack noticed first. Same one? Yes. Drive casual, he said, slipping lower in his seat. I turned left instead of right, looping through side streets until the sedan's headlights vanished in the rear mirror. We parked behind an old print shop, its windows boarded but its back door still open to certain friends. Inside, The air smelled of ink and dust. Used to work here, Jack said. Before the bridge. He booted up an ancient desktop, connected the drive, and began copying the files. This system's offline, he explained. No remote wipes here. Just honest rust. As data crawled across the screen, he looked at me. You really plan to blow this open? I don't have a choice. Sure you do, he said. Most people choose comfort over conscience. You're not most people, but you still have skin in the game. I met his eyes. What about you? What's in it for you now? He smiled faintly. Sleep, maybe. Haven't had the honest kind since the day they turned my code inside out. The transfer bar reached 100%. He ejected the drive, handed it to me. 1 copy safe. Keep it somewhere they can't subpoena without a warrant. I slipped it into my inner pocket. Tomorrow we show the board. Tomorrow, he said, might come sooner than you think. At that moment, glass shattered at the front of the shop. 2 figures burst in black suits, silent. Jack grabbed my arm, dragging me behind the old printer. They're not cops, he whispered. Too quiet. A flashlight beam swept across the floor, catching the dust in bright circles. My pulse hammered. Jack held a wrench in one hand like a relic of resistance. When the beam passed, he whispered. Back exit, now. We ran. The alley was slick with rain, neon reflections pooling under our feet. Behind us, a shout. Stop. Jack turned, hurled the wrench, glass cracked, and a light died. We ducked into another street, breath ragged, rain biting our faces. Where to? I gasped. The library, he said. They've got locks and silence. 2 things we need right now. We disappeared into the wet dark, the city swallowing our footsteps as sirens rose somewhere too close and too late. SFX. Rain intensifying, footsteps echoing, a faint alarm fading under the hiss of water on pavement. The library loomed like a sanctuary carved from fog. Its stone steps gleamed slick beneath the rain. And the big bronze doors, locked for the night, seemed to judge us silently. Jack led me around the side, to a service entrance where he'd wedged a sliver of cardboard into the latch years ago. It gave with a sigh. Inside, the dark smelled of paper and old heating vents. Emergency lights glowed along the carpeted corridor, dim gold beacons leading deeper into the stacks. They won't look for us here, Jack whispered, shutting the door behind us. Nobody believes libraries matter anymore. I followed him through aisles of forgotten knowledge, listening to the rain drumming against the high windows. My heartbeat refused to slow. Who were they? I asked. Security contractors, he said. Conrad's dogs. Private, deniable, expensive. You're sure? They moved like people who never have to explain themselves. He found a reading table in the back corner, set his pack down, and pulled out an old towel to dry his hands. We can rest a minute. Then we'll figure out next steps. I sank into the chair opposite him, feeling the exhaustion seep through the adrenaline. Jack. I said quietly. What happens when this story breaks? Even if we prove everything, the company could crumble. Thousands of jobs, pensions, livelihoods. He met my eyes. And how many lives already crumbled so those jobs could exist? You're not destroying something pure, you're disinfecting a wound. That's easy to say when it's not your wound, I muttered. It is mine, he said gently. And yours too, if you're brave enough to admit it. He opened a thermos, poured coffee that smelled like burnt hope, and slid a cup toward me. You ever think about how it started? He asked. Why I built Sentinel? Tell me, I said. He leaned back, voice low, the rhythm of confession wrapped in the whisper of rain. My wife, Elena, was a nurse. We used to talk about privacy, how patients trusted the system with everything: bodies, secrets, fears. I wanted to build something that kept data as sacred as those promises. Sentinel was supposed to be the guardian. Encrypt, randomize, protect. But protection costs money, and surveillance earns it. When she got sick, I saw both sides of that coin. He paused, staring into the dark. Her insurance used predictive analytics data from my own code to decide she wasn't worth the cost of treatment. They called it optimization. I called it betrayal. The silence afterward was heavier than the rain. I felt the words settle inside me, cold and sharp. I didn't know, I said softly. You weren't meant to, he said. The system runs better when guilt stays compartmentalized. I rubbed my temples. Conrad doesn't just want to hide the past. He wants to expand it. He's pushing a new project, Omnisite. Full-scale behavioral tracking. He pitched it to the board as personalized access for underserved communities. Jack laughed bitterly. Underserved meaning profitable to study, not to help. Yes. I hesitated. He's scheduled a vote tomorrow to approve the funding. If he wins, Omnisite becomes policy. We'd be harvesting every public Wi-Fi user from coast to coast. Jack set his cup down. Then we can't wait for the boardroom. We take the evidence there before he seals the deal. You mean crash the meeting? Call it attending uninvited. That's suicide, I said. He controls security. You control the truth, Jack said. And you've got me. 2 ghosts might be harder to kill than 1. He smiled faintly, and despite everything, I smiled back. For a moment, the air between us felt almost calm. Then a faint buzz broke at a vibration from my coat pocket. I pulled out my phone. Unknown number. 1 message. You're trespassing. Leave now. My stomach tightened. Jack leaned closer to read it. He's tracking your GPS, he said. Turn it off. I powered it down, tossed it into a trash bin. We're out of time. Then we move, he said. We slipped out a side door into the alley behind the library. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick with reflections of streetlights. The city felt hung between breaths. My car's too exposed, I said. He'll have eyes on it. We walk, Jack said. I know a shortcut. He led me through a maze of alleys until we reached a pedestrian tunnel beneath the interstate. The air was damp, thick with graffiti and echoes. Halfway through, a figure stepped out from the shadows. Lena Park. Jesus, Lena, I gasped. What are you doing here? She looked terrified. I've been calling you all night. Conrad knows about the drive. He's blaming me for leaking to the Tribune. He said if I don't tell him where you are, he'll... Her voice cracked. Jack raised a hand gently. Easy. We're not blaming you. But if he's onto you, we can't stand still. He's staging something tomorrow, Lena said. A press conference right after the board meeting. He's going to announce Omnisite as if it's already approved, show off a fake demo, claim it's a humanitarian project. That's impossible, I said. He doesn't have clearance yet. He doesn't care. He's betting you won't challenge him publicly. He said, she'll fold before she ruins her own empire. I felt the old anger rise, that corporate instinct to win at all costs. He doesn't know me as well as he thinks. Jack touched my arm. He's setting a trap. Don't walk into it blind. Then we'll turn the trap inside out, I said. Tomorrow we bring the real demo, your code, the evidence, everything. If we show the board and the press the same moment, he can't spin it. Lena's eyes widened. You'll need proof that's irrefutable. I tapped my coat pocket. It's right here. She exhaled. Then I'll make sure you have the stage. I can delay the PR team long enough for you to speak. Jack nodded approvingly. Brave woman. Terrified woman, she said, managing a tremor of a smile. But fear's just courage that hasn't had coffee yet. We parted ways near a bus stop, Lena disappearing into the drizzle. Jack and I walked the last mile to an all-night diner near the pier. The neon sign buzzed faintly, reflected in puddles like broken code. Inside, the waitress gave us a look but said nothing. We took the booth by the window. You realize what you're doing tomorrow, Jack said. If you expose him, they'll come for you too. Board, investors, regulators, they'll say you betrayed your shareholders. Maybe I did, I said. But not my conscience. That's rarer currency, he said. Spend it wisely. He tore a piece of napkin and began sketching quick notations, simple symbols, loops, lines. What's that? I asked. Failsafe, he said. If he wipes the servers tomorrow, this code rebuilds the original algorithm from scratch. But it needs to be injected live, during the meeting, before the system's locked down. Can you do that? With the right network access. Which only you have. So we do it together, I said. He looked at me for a long time, then nodded slowly. Together. We left the diner as dawn bled pale over the skyline. The city looked innocent again, washed and waiting. At the curb, Jack stopped. Staring east. You ever notice, he said, how rain cleans everything except guilt? Maybe that's our job, I said. To finish what the weather starts. He smiled. Then let's make it rain in the boardroom. When I dropped him near the bridge, the sky was just beginning to glow. He leaned into the window. Get some sleep, Maggie. Tomorrow you'll need all your ghosts. So will you? I said. He tapped the roof twice, an unspoken salute, and disappeared into the underpass as the first light caught the wet pavement. I watched until he was gone, then drove home. The drive pressed against my chest like a second heartbeat. In 12 hours, we'd either save something worth saving or bury it for good. The city didn't know it yet. But a storm was coming, And this time the rain had names. SFX. Faint morning breeze, distant gulls. The slow build of rain returning like applause. The boardroom smelled like money and ozone, that sterile blend of technology and control. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the skyline. Beyond it, Seattle's morning clouds hung heavy, a ceiling waiting to fall. I arrived early, laptop in hand, the USB drive hidden inside my blazer. Lena was already there, setting up the press live stream equipment with quiet efficiency. Her eyes met mine, a flicker of nerves quickly smoothed into professionalism. "They'll start in 10 minutes, she whispered. "Press is tuned in remotely. You'll have about 3 minutes before Conrad takes over." 3 minutes is enough, I said, though my palms were sweating. Jack hadn't arrived yet, but he'd promised to meet me in the sublevel server room. The plan was simple in theory. While I presented, he'd inject the failsafe algorithm into the network. Truth would go live before anyone could stop it. But theories, like empires, are brittle. Conrad entered with his entourage, a dozen executives and 2 lawyers in suits sharp enough to draw blood. He radiated calm dominance, the kind men like him confuse with virtue. "Maggie," he said, smiling as if last night's threats were a misunderstanding. "Glad you could make it. We're making history today." "That's one word for it," I said. The board took their seats. Cameras blinked red in the corners. I felt every lens like a stare. Conrad began his opening remarks, all smooth rhetoric about innovation and inclusion. "Omnisite," he said, "would revolutionize access for disadvantaged communities." He painted it as a miracle cure for digital inequality. "We're giving people visibility," he said. "The ability to be seen by the systems that can help them." The irony was surgical. Visibility was surveillance wearing makeup. I glanced at my watch signal time. I opened my laptop, the system syncing automatically to the building network. Somewhere beneath us, Jack would be waiting for the link. I cleared my throat. "Before we vote," I said, standing, "I'd like to share a story." Conrad's smile flickered. "Now may not be. It won't take long," I said. Louder this time, my voice carrying across the room. 10 years ago, Haleworks acquired a company called CipherTrace. They developed an encryption project called Sentinel. It was meant to protect user data. But under the direction of certain executives, it was rewritten into something else, a tracking mechanism targeting low-income users. The data was sold, the profits buried, and the whistleblower fired. Murmurs rippled around the table. Conrad straightened, his eyes narrowing. "This is ancient history," he said evenly. "Irrelevant to today's discussion." "Then you won't mind if I prove it's not." I plugged in the USB. The monitors along the wall flickered from the Haleworks logo to a scrolling stream of code, Jack's code. Green characters danced like a heartbeat across the screen. Gasps filled the room. "These are the original Sentinel logs," I said. "They show exactly who authorized the data sale." The code resolved into emails, signatures, timestamps. At the top of the chain, Conrad Blake. "This is defamation," he snapped. "Those files are fabricated." "No," I said quietly. "They're recovered. And they're authenticated." He turned to the IT officer. "Shut it down." The officer hesitated, fingers hovering. "Sir, the system's locked. It's running a live encryption cycle, origin unknown." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Jack. "We're in." I exhaled. Conrad's calm fractured. He strode to the console, slamming keys. "This feed ends now." "It can't," I said. "The system's been mirrored to external servers. Everything we see here is being broadcast to the press feed." Lena gave a barely perceptible nod from her station. Conrad froze, realizing too late that the cameras weren't recording his speech anymore, they were recording his panic. "You think this will save you?" he hissed. "You'll take the fall with me." "Maybe," I said. "But at least I'll fall on the right side of the line." The door burst open. 2 security guards entered, faces tense. "Sir," one said to Conrad, "we've got a breach in the sublevel server room. Someone's inside." My stomach clenched. "Jack." Conrad saw my reaction and smiled coldly. "Ah. The ghost in your machine." He gestured to the guards. "Go down there. Bring him up." I stepped forward. "Don't. He's the reason you're not already in handcuffs. You touch him, you confirm everything you're trying to deny." But Conrad's men were already gone. The board members exchanged uneasy looks. Half rising, half sitting back down as if afraid to choose a side. I turned to Lena. "Keep the feed live no matter what happens." She nodded, whispering, "Go." I ran. The elevator ride to the sublevel felt endless. The air grew colder, the lights dimmer. When the doors opened, I heard shouting boots on tile, a struggle. Stop. I called, the word echoing. Jack was cornered near the server racks, clutching a small terminal, the failsafe screen flashing completion. One guard had his arm twisted behind his back. The other was reaching for his holster. Enough. I shouted. You're live on every major news network right now. Touch him and the whole country will see it. The guards hesitated, looking at each other. Jack straightened, blood on his lip but eyes blazing. It's done, he said to me. They can't erase it now, the logs are public. I took his hand, steadying him. Then let's go finish this. We stepped back into the elevator, rising toward the boardroom like divers coming up for air. When the doors opened, chaos had replaced decorum. Phones rang, reporters shouted through the speakers, the board members arguing in panicked tones. Conrad stood at the window, jaw tight, watching police cars pull into the plaza below. You ruined us, he said softly, not turning. You ruined yourself, I answered. I just turned on the lights. He turned then, eyes cold with something darker than anger fear. You think you've won? They'll eat you alive, Maggie. The market, the regulators, the shareholders. You'll be the face of this disaster, not me. Maybe, I said. But at least I can still look at my reflection. Behind us, one of the directors cleared her throat. Miss Hale, she said cautiously. The evidence is compelling. We'll call an emergency vote. Effective immediately. Mr. Blake is suspended pending investigation. Conrad laughed once, sharp as breaking glass. Investigation? You're all complicit. You signed every report. And now we'll sign a confession, I said. The police entered. 2 officers in plain clothes. One approached Conrad, murmured something. His shoulders sagged just enough to betray the truth. He'd lost. They led him away as cameras clicked like rain. I stood there, pulse steady, until the room began to empty. Lena appeared beside me, pale but smiling. The feed's viral, she said. Half the city's watching. You just detonated a corporation on live TV. Then maybe we can rebuild something cleaner, I said. What about him? She asked. Nodding to Jack, who stood by the door, looking exhausted and out of place among the glass and marble. I walked to him. It's over, I said. You did it. He shook his head. We did. But it's never over. Someone else will try again with a different name, a different smile. You'll have to keep watching. Then stay, I said impulsively. Help me rebuild. Lead the new ethics division. He blinked, surprised. You trust a man who lives under bridges? More than I trust anyone who owns one. For the first time, his laugh wasn't bitter. You've got a strange way of running an empire. It's not an empire anymore, I said. It's a promise. He looked at me, eyes softening. Then maybe there's hope for both of us. Outside, thunder rolled a final punctuation from the storm. As police cars drove off with Conrad, the rain returned, gentle this time, washing the plaza in silver. Jack and I stepped out beneath it, the cameras forgotten, the city humming with the sound of truth finally told. Somewhere above, lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the mirrored tower of Haleworks. In its reflection, we didn't look like a CEO and a vagrant anymore, just 2 people who had stopped running. SFX, rain steady, faint sirens fading, heartbeats slowing into the rhythm of falling water. A month later the city had learned to breathe again. The headlines had softened from outrage to reflection. The rain had turned to a quieter kind of drizzle. And the name Haleworks no longer carried the same metallic gleam of invincibility. It carried weight, and maybe that was better. The morning I returned to the office, the building no longer felt like a fortress. Reporters still lingered outside, their cameras waiting for apologies or redemption. Whichever sold more. I had none left to give them. Inside, the lobby smelled of new paint, the logo on the wall stripped of its mirror finish, replaced by a simple matte gray emblem. Recode Initiative, data for people. Not profit. Jack had chosen the name. He said it sounded less like a company, and more like a repair. He was late. As usual. I'd learned that schedules meant little to a man who'd spent a decade measuring time by daylight and soup kitchens. But when he did arrive, the air in the room shifted, like a door cracking open to weather you hadn't expected. He'd shaved, trimmed his hair, wore a clean jacket that still didn't quite fit. But the bridge had left its fingerprints on him in ways a shower couldn't erase. You look almost respectable, I said, smiling. He grinned back. Give me another month. I might start voting. Don't go too far, I said. I like you subversive. We took the elevator to the top floor, now stripped of the old luxury. The glass desk was gone, replaced by wood, warm and imperfect. Screens were smaller, meetings fewer, walls covered with sketches of community projects. Jack stopped before a photo pinned near the window. A group of volunteers teaching coding classes at a shelter. "That's the program you started?" he asked. "You started it," I corrected. "I just signed the checks." He ran his finger along the frame. "Never thought I'd see people under bridges writing code instead of just surviving." "That's the point," I said. "Survival shouldn't be a career." He nodded, quiet for a moment. "The press is calling you a whistleblower CEO. That doesn't bother you?" "Used to," I admitted. "But if the truth makes you a whistleblower, maybe we need more of them." He laughed softly. "Careful. That kind of talk could start a movement." "Good," I said. "Maybe it should." We spent the morning reviewing the rebuild plan. The old data systems were gone. Every trace of Sentinel's corrupted legacy had been archived for legal review. A new architecture, open source and monitored by a public oversight board, was taking its place. Transparency had become our religion. By noon, Lena joined us, her calm restored after weeks of crisis management. She carried a stack of reports and a look that blended exhaustion with pride. "Regulators are satisfied," she said. "The lawsuits are moving fast but fair. And the stock's stabilizing." "That's a miracle," I said. "No," she replied, "it's honesty. Turns out the market likes it when you stop lying." Jack chuckled. "That might be the rarest sentence I've heard this year." Lena turned to him. "You're speaking at the community launch tomorrow, right?" "If Maggie doesn't change her mind," he said. "I'm not exactly a poster child for corporate reform." "You're the only one who can tell the story right," I said. "From the bridge to the boardroom, it's yours now." His eyes softened, but he said nothing. After Lena left, he walked to the window. The rain was starting again, fine threads against the glass. "You ever think about Conrad?" he asked quietly. "He's facing charges," I said. "Fraud, data exploitation, obstruction. He'll have years to think about his choices." "That's not what I meant," Jack said. "Do you ever think about what turned him into that? Maybe the system didn't just reward his greed. It demanded it." "Maybe," I said. "But at some point, choice still matters. You can't keep blaming gravity for falling." He looked at me then, really looked, as if measuring how much of the storm still lived behind my calm. "And you? What will you do when the cameras stop caring?" "Keep going," I said simply. "Keep building something that remembers why it exists." "That's not bad," he said. "You sound like someone who believes in redemption. Don't you?" He hesitated. "I'm learning." That night, we held the first open meeting of Recode in the same church basement where I'd found him weeks ago. The air buzzed with energy: students, programmers, teachers, volunteers, people who'd never had a reason to stand in the same room before. The hum of conversation was a living thing. Pastor John introduced us. "Tonight," he said, "we begin something different, not charity, but partnership. Not pity, but purpose." Jack stepped up to the microphone. For a second, he looked awkward, like the sound system might bite him. Then his voice steadied. "I used to write code to make machines secure," he said. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot that the real security isn't in firewalls, it's in trust. You can't encrypt that. You have to earn it. Tonight, we start earning it back." Applause rippled through the crowd, not thunderous, but real. I felt a lump rise in my throat. When it was over, he found me by the door. "You didn't tell me it would feel like church," he said. "It kind of is," I replied. "Only with better Wi-Fi." He smiled, but behind it was a sadness I couldn't name. "You'll keep this going," he said. "Even if I'm not around." "What do you mean not around?" I asked. "You're part of this." "Maybe," he said. "But some ghosts belong to the bridges they came from." I wanted to argue, but something in his voice stopped me. He reached into his coat, pulled out the old knit cap, now washed and mended. "You keep this," he said. "For the next time it rains." "Jack. No speeches," he said softly. "We both did what we came to do. Maybe that's enough." He squeezed my hand once, then disappeared into the crowd before I could follow. I didn't see him again for weeks. Spring came, the city brightened, and the program grew beyond what any of us expected. The news cycle moved on. Haleworks became Recode, and Recode became more than a company, it became a mirror. Then one morning a letter arrived, no return address, just my name in neat block letters. Inside was a photograph of the bridge at dawn, empty except for a single line scrawled in pen. Sometimes ghosts just need to see the sunrise. I smiled through the ache. Wherever he'd gone, he wasn't hiding anymore. He'd found a way to live outside the code, outside the past. And maybe that was the truest version of justice. That evening, I drove to the bridge. The city hummed with quiet light, reflections dancing on the water. I set the cap on the railing and watched it ripple in the wind. "Thank you," I whispered to the river, to the rain, to whoever was listening. A voice in memory answered, "You can't encrypt trust, you have to earn it." I smiled. The world had started over before. It would again. As I turned to leave, the first drops began to fall soft, persistent, forgiving. Somewhere in that sound, I heard footsteps fading into distance. And for the first time, they didn't sound lost. They sounded free. SFX. Gentle rain, faint city noise, then piano slow, hopeful notes carrying into silence.